Hi, I'm Durrell. The day I told my wife I got fired, she didn't even blink. She just looked me in the eye and said, "Pathetic. Useless." I had only pretended to lose my job, to surprise her, to see if she'd still choose me over the money. But the second I turned my back, she called her parents, laughed, and said I was never worth the $92,000. Said she was just waiting for the 5-year mark to clean me out. I wasn't supposed to hear that call. But I did. And what I uncovered after that, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan. Legal. Ruthless. Years in the making. So here's the question. How do you fight back when the person who swore to love you is already writing the script for your downfall? I pulled into the driveway just after 6:30. The sky over Houston still held some light, the kind that clings on in early spring, reluctant to give in to the night. The neighborhood was quiet. Just the occasional bark of a dog or the low hum of a distant lawnmower fading into nothing. I sat in the car a moment longer than usual, letting the engine idle. My hands rested on the steering wheel. I didn't know why, but something in me wanted this day to pause a few seconds more. The garage light flicked on as I stepped out, shoes crunching softly against the concrete. I pushed open the front door, hearing the faint creak I'd meant to fix for months now. Inside, everything looked just like it always did. Too neat, almost staged. The lights were on in the kitchen. I heard soft footsteps above, likely Marissa moving from our bedroom to the hallway. I slipped off my shoes, loosened my tie, and leaned against the counter, watching the kitchen clock tick. This was the moment I'd planned. Not something big, just a little joke, an icebreaker. I'd been given a temporary promotion today, project lead for a new internal software rollout. Came with a $4,000 bonus, not life-changing, but something worth a toast. I'd imagined Marissa smiling, maybe hugging me, maybe even offering to order takeout to celebrate. So I thought I'd tease her first, make it playful. When she came downstairs, I turned and said casually, "Got fired today." No build-up, no grin yet. I was holding it back, waiting for her to ask, "What? Are you serious?" But she didn't blink, didn't ask. Her face twisted in that way people do when they've already decided something about you. Her arms folded. She said, "Of course you did." I laughed softly, thinking she was joking back. "You've been pathetic and useless for years, Durrell," she added. "You think I haven't noticed?" I stood there. My mouth didn't work. My hands still held the countertop behind me, like I needed something solid to keep me from falling through the floor. I looked at her, not angry, not confused, just empty. It was like the air had gone out of the room and all that remained was a static buzz in my ears. "I was joking," I said finally, voice low. "I didn't get fired, Doesn't matter," she interrupted, turning away. "The truth was going to catch up to you eventually." I didn't respond. I stepped out into the hallway, not storming out, just walking, quiet, slow, like my body was on autopilot. From there, I heard her voice again, but this time, she wasn't talking to me. Her tone changed, sugary smooth, the one she uses on her parents when she wants to sound like a doting daughter instead of the woman who just called her husband worthless. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but she didn't lower her voice. She said, "Yeah, his 92 grand a year isn't worth the headache. I'm just playing nice until I hit 5 years. That's when I file, take what I can, and bounce." There was a pause, then a faint laugh from her. 6 more months. I'm counting." I felt the breath leave my lungs, not like a gasp, not dramatic, just a slow deflation. She was planning this. Every smile over dinner, every small gesture, every conversation we had about our future, it was all staged. And I wouldn't have known, not tonight, if I hadn't made that stupid joke. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm back in. Something colder settled over me. I stood still in the hallway, listening to the rise and fall of her voice in the other room, taking in every syllable. That's when I realized something I'd refused to see. This wasn't new. The contempt in her voice wasn't an accident. It had just finally surfaced without a mask. Maybe I'd been too proud, too hopeful, too focused on being the provider to notice. But now I knew. And knowing was power. If I'd gone back in there, I would have yelled, cried, demanded answers. But I did none of that. Instead, I turned, grabbed my keys again, and opened the front door. "I need some air," I called out, loud enough for her to hear. She didn't respond. I stepped outside. The air had cooled, and the faint smell of jasmine from our neighbor's yard carried on the wind. I walked to the end of the driveway, not really knowing where I was going. But I knew one thing. I wasn't the same man who walked through that door an hour ago. As I pulled out of the driveway, her words echoed like they'd been carved into the silence. Not just cruel, they were planned. That fact sat in my chest like a stone. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. The streets blurred past, headlights trailing like comets across my windshield. The city was still moving. People dining, laughing, walking their dogs, while my life had suddenly split down the middle. About 20 minutes in, I found myself parked near Buffalo Bayou, close to the trail where Marissa and I used to jog. The engine hummed for a moment, then I turned it off. The silence hit harder than the drive. I let my head fall back against the seat, eyes staring at nothing. It wasn't just what she said tonight. It was that she meant it, that she had rehearsed it. And that opened the door to a memory I hadn't thought about in years. It was the summer barbecue at her parents' house. 3 years ago, maybe more. Hot as hell that day. I was manning the grill, flipping burgers, trying to make a good impression. Her dad liked a man who worked with his hands. So I figured manning the grill was my shot. Her brothers were doing what they always did, sitting around, drinking beer, tossing each other jokes they thought were charming, but always felt off. Marissa was walking back and forth with her phone in her hand, talking to her cousin about some wedding she was planning. I remember turning to her, sweat beating down my face, and saying, "Hey babe, could you bring me some water?" She didn't even look at me. She leaned in and whispered through clenched teeth, "Don't make me look bad. Handle it yourself." It cut, but I swallowed it. I remember laughing it off when one of her uncles asked if I needed help. Said something like, "Nah, I've got it all under control." But now I see it. That was the first time she pushed me down in public, made me feel small. And I let it slide because I wanted to keep the peace, because I thought it was a one-off. Turns out it was a blueprint. I blinked back to the present, pulled out my phone, and opened the shared financial app we barely used. I didn't even know why I opened it. Some instinct, some small itch in the back of my brain. We both had access to it, though she always said she preferred her own system for personal expenses. I never thought twice about it. I was the steady one, the consistent one, and I liked keeping track of things. Scrolling through the statements, something caught my eye. Recurring transfers. Small ones. $80 here, $100 there, once a month. Same date. All labeled holding. "That's odd," I murmured. I tapped into the details. The account name wasn't one I recognized. No institution logo. Just holding. That was it. $80 a month. Not enough to trigger a red flag. But it wasn't a one-time thing. It started 4.5 years ago, a few months after we got married. You don't build a secret. Holding pattern unless you're expecting to leave the runway. My breath slowed. My body didn't move. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was worse. Cold clarity. This wasn't just some passing betrayal. It was a strategy. She's been making deposits for years. Preparing. I leaned back in the seat, hand covering my face. And for the first time in years, I felt ashamed. Not of her actions, but of how long I let myself believe we were on the same team. I thought showing up, being responsible, paying bills on time, remembering her birthday, that those things meant I was doing marriage right. But I never once asked myself if she was in it with me. I was the youngest of 3 boys. My parents divorced before I turned 10, and I swore I'd be different. I swore I'd hold it together. Maybe that's why I held on, even when it cracked. Maybe that's why I brushed off the little cuts, the small humiliations. I thought love meant endurance. But love isn't supposed to make you feel like a fool. My eyes burned, not with tears, but with that slow sting of waking up too late. I opened the app again, scrolled back farther. The pattern was consistent. Same dates, same amounts, slight increases over the years. Intentional, like someone slowly packing a bag under the bed while you're asleep. Then I noticed the names in the memo lines. Extra cushion, long-term, independent. Just once it said, after Q4. She didn't just stop loving me. She replaced me with a future version of herself that didn't need me at all. I should have felt rage. I should have thrown my phone, shouted at the wind. But all I felt was a quiet shift. A voice inside me, one I hadn't heard since I was a kid, whispered, "You're the last one to know again." I took a deep breath, sat up straighter. No, not this time. She can build her exit strategy, but I'm not going to be the clueless husband left blinking in the ruins. Not again. By the time I made it home, the sky was starting to shift from black to a heavy shade of blue. Streetlights blinked off one by one, as if the city itself was tired of pretending to be awake. I sat in the truck a while longer, watching the window of our bedroom, trying to picture what she was doing in there. Sleeping, texting someone, dreaming of her future without me. I didn't go inside right away. I waited until the sun began to push at the horizon, just enough to justify the creak of the front door without waking suspicion. I walked in slowly. Everything felt foreign. The walls were the same, the smell of her lavender diffuser still faint in the air, but it was like walking into someone else's life, someone I didn't know anymore. The house was quiet, still. No coffee brewing, no rustling upstairs, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of a neighbor's sprinkler system kicking on. In the kitchen, I stopped. My eyes landed on a framed print above the breakfast nook, something her parents had given us when we got engaged. A glossy quote printed in cursive, "Marry someone who lifts you higher." Funny. I used to think it was about partnership. Now I wondered if it was a warning. My gaze drifted down. The counter was always hers, cluttered but orderly. Her planner open to the week, grocery lists written in her neat handwriting. My things, meanwhile, were tucked away in the drawer beside the fridge. Even our bills followed that pattern. Hers out in the open, mine filed like afterthoughts. I hadn't noticed it before. Or maybe I had, but chose not to make a fuss. Another compromise in a long list of them. The coffee pot hissed to life. I stood there waiting, arms crossed, trying to decide what was more bitter, what I was about to drink, or what I was living through. And then it hit me. A memory I hadn't thought about in a long time. 2 years ago, Sunday brunch. One of those rooftop spots Marissa liked. Trendy, loud, full of people pretending to care about each other. I had parked the car and walked in late. She was already seated with her friend Kelsey, sipping mimosas like it was a full-time job. I heard Kelsey laugh, then ask, "Are you actually happy, though? Like, really?" Marissa shrugged, swirled her drink, and said with a little laugh, "He's stable. You keep someone like him until you don't need him anymore." I remember stopping mid-step. I told myself later it was sarcasm. She joked like that. That was her sense of humor, dry, cutting, a little cruel at times. But it hadn't been a joke. I see that now. She meant it. That wasn't the moment things broke. That was the moment I should have started paying attention. But I let it pass. I let her pass. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up. A notification from our HR portal at work. I frowned. Unusual at this hour. I unlocked it. Your spouse has updated beneficiary information. Timestamp. Last Wednesday. I just stood there. I hadn't authorized anything. She would have needed credentials. My credentials. Or answers to security questions. Maybe she guessed them. Maybe she already knew them. I opened the app and checked the recent changes. She had replaced her name on my life insurance primary beneficiary with a trust. A trust I didn't recognize. Created 2 weeks ago. She had done it without telling me. Without asking. Without blinking. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not panic. Not grief. But something more focused. The kind of pressure that comes right before a decision. I sat in my truck in the office parking lot, barely hearing the early traffic whirring by. My coffee sat untouched in the console. I was staring out at nothing, but my mind was busy. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't just cold behavior or a rough patch. This was calculation, planning, execution. She wasn't waiting to see if things would work out. She was making sure she'd benefit when they didn't. She thought I'd never check. That I'd go to work, come home, grill on weekends, pay my part of the mortgage, and stay quiet while she designed an exit route lined with my assets. She thought I was the type of man who didn't fight back. For years, she might have been right. I'd grown up trying not to make noise. I was the youngest, the one who learned to keep things smooth so others didn't argue, the fixer, the one who stayed silent when hurt. But I wasn't that boy anymore, and she didn't get to script the end of our story alone. I looked back down at my phone, rereading the notification. I knew what this meant, and for the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt awake. I didn't go back to the office after lunch. I told my manager I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a lie, just not the full truth. As I drove home, the streets looked the same, the afternoon sun flashing off windshields and storefront windows. But inside me, something had shifted. I was no longer just reacting. I needed answers. And I needed to ask them while I could still control the tone. The front door creaked a little as I opened it. The house was too quiet. A kind of stillness that didn't feel restful. It felt staged, like the silence was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. I stepped into the living room. Marissa was on the couch, legs curled under her, scrolling her phone like nothing had happened. No glance, no hello, just the same muted indifference I'd grown used to. But now I could see it for what it was. "I need to talk to you," I said, standing just inside the doorway. She glanced up, only slightly. "Can it wait?" "No," I said quietly. "It really can't." She sighed, locked her screen, and set the phone down with exaggerated care, like she wanted to make sure I noticed how inconvenient this was for her. I kept my voice even. There are some charges in our shared account I need to understand. The recurring transfers labeled holding, they've been going out monthly for years. Her eyes narrowed, not in confusion, in irritation. You're really going to do this right now? She said, shaking her head. I took a breath. I just want to understand. That's all. She stood, arms crossed. You always do this when you feel insecure. You dig for things that aren't there. It wasn't an answer. It wasn't even close. When did being curious about our finances become an act of insecurity? I asked. This is our money, Marissa. You're being dramatic, she snapped. It's not like I'm hiding anything. If you cared so much, maybe you should have asked years ago instead of zoning out every time we talked about bills. The words hit with surgical precision, and she knew it. That was the real wound. She'd been sharpening them for years. I'm asking now, I said evenly, so explain it to me. She turned away, muttering, I don't have time to walk you through every little thing. You either trust me or you don't. It was that simple to her. A refusal dressed up as moral superiority. What about the insurance beneficiary change? I added, quieter this time. That got her attention. She turned back slowly, face unreadable. You should be grateful I manage things around here, she said. You never notice anything unless it's falling apart. I had to update it because you'd let everything lapse if I didn't step in. That word again, grateful. Not trusted, not respected. Grateful. She saw my silence as a win. She picked her phone back up and walked into the kitchen like the conversation was over. But it wasn't. I stepped outside. The heat hit me immediately, thick and pressing. I walked to the edge of the backyard and sat down on the brick step near the grill I'd installed 2 summers ago. I used to be proud of this little patio. Built it myself, weekend by weekend. Now it just felt like another thing I held together while everything else cracked. I pulled out my phone. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe just proof that I wasn't imagining all of it. That's when the notification came in. Shared family account. Our cell plan. A blocked number was recently added to her phone line. Strange. I tapped into the history. The same number had been showing up on logs for 6 months. Always on weekdays. Always mid-morning or early evening, when I was either commuting or in meetings. One of the entries had a saved transcription. A voicemail, cloud synced without her realizing. I didn't even know the account did that. I read it once, then again. Once the 5-year mark hits, everything is yours. Just keep her focused. He'll fold like always. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. There was no name attached, no context. But the words were enough. Someone, on her side, was orchestrating this. Not just emotionally, legally, financially. I was no longer dealing with a cold marriage or a selfish partner. I was a target in a plan. And I'd walked straight into it with my eyes closed for years. I sat there for a while, phone in hand, sun burning across my shoulders. I wanted to throw the phone across the yard. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But none of that would help me now. I needed clarity. I needed control. And I wasn't going to get either by lashing out. I stood slowly, brushed the dust from my jeans, and walked back inside. She was in the kitchen again, phone to her ear, pretending not to notice me. For the first time, I didn't see her as someone I misunderstood. I saw her for exactly who she'd been all along. And I knew, without needing to say it out loud, This ends on my terms. She left at 6:42. I heard her car pull out of the driveway, tires soft against the pavement, like the evening didn't want to make a sound. Her yoga mat was slung over her shoulder, water bottle clipped to her bag like always. Routine, casual, practiced. I waited a full 3 minutes before I moved. The drawer in the hallway, top one, left side, had been locked since the first month we moved in. She said it was where she kept old bills and unimportant stuff. I never pushed, never had reason to, until now. I'd found the spare key 6 months back, tucked behind a stack of outdated tax folders in the office cabinet. I hadn't even known what it opened at the time. I just held on to it. Instinct, I guess. Now I was glad I did. The drawer clicked open with a reluctant pop, as if even the furniture understood this wasn't supposed to happen. Neat rows of envelopes greeted me, some marked with years, others with months. The earliest one was from just after our 1-year anniversary. I could feel the pressure build in my chest as I scanned the labels. Q3, credit consolidation, joint visibility adjustment, asset transfer buffer. And then I saw it. A slim black notebook tucked beneath a set of Amex statements, its front cover embossed with one word. Planning. Not journal, not notes. Planning. I opened it slowly. The handwriting was hers. Precise, slanted, a little too perfect. The first page was sectioned off into years. Year 1 to 2, build trust. Maintain ideal image. Year 3 to 4, shift visible income. Establish private savings. Redirect joint expenses. Year 5, initiate legal separation. Emotional neglect grounds. Retain advantage in asset division. It hit me like ice water. This wasn't a cry for help. This wasn't pain turned bitter. This was deliberate. I flipped further. Bullet points, reminders, deadlines. All of it coordinated down to the week. My name was barely in the book, just terms, husband, or subject. Subject. I pressed my back against the wall and closed my eyes, forcing breath into my lungs. I wasn't just living with someone who no longer loved me. I was living with someone who'd studied me and planned for my collapse. Beneath the notebook, there were receipts I'd never seen, withdrawals from an account I didn't recognize, a secondary credit card, one she never mentioned. Month after month, small amounts routed through it, enough to stay under any alert threshold, but over time, it added up. $8,000 in 2 years, all siphoned out slowly, silently. She was creating a trail, one that painted her as the responsible party, the one who managed the household, while making me look negligent, disconnected, irresponsible. I thumbed through the envelopes again, almost mechanically now, searching for more. That's when I found the emails, printed, highlighted, folded carefully into a plain white folder labeled Correspondence M. The first line of the first email stopped me cold. From her mother, the subject line, timeline check-in. Inside, a paragraph that read like strategy notes from a boardroom. 5 years qualifies you for full spousal support and insurance carryover. Stay civil. Keep him consistent. Do not instigate arguments. He's easier to control when he thinks you're still unsure. The next email, dated 2 months ago, was shorter, but worse. He was always weak, Marissa. You were smart to see it early. Keep your eyes on the date, not the emotions. This is survival. There it was, not just betrayal from a partner. This was family-backed manipulation. They hadn't just encouraged her, they coached her. Like I was a mark, like I was too simple, too slow to ever notice. I lowered the pages slowly, afraid they might shake in my hands if I moved too fast. I didn't cry. Not yet. But something in me folded inward. Everything I'd done, Every soft-spoken compromise, every skipped argument, every night I came home early just to be a good husband, they had turned it into ammunition. Kindness repackaged as weakness, loyalty painted as naivety. I sat on the floor, knees bent, the planning notebook open across my lap. It didn't feel like I was in my home anymore. It felt like I was standing inside the blueprint of a dismantling. I don't know how long I sat there. The hallway light dimmed as the sun dropped behind the trees. The clock ticked. Outside, someone's lawn sprinkler kicked on. Mundane sounds that only deepened the contrast of what I just read. Eventually, something shifted. I stood up, slow, deliberate, not to destroy anything, not to rage, but to protect myself. I took out my phone, opened the camera. I snapped photos of every page, every email, every receipt. I uploaded them to a private folder on my cloud account, then backed them up again to an encrypted drive I kept in my desk drawer. I put everything back just as I found it. Angles aligned, papers stacked, drawer locked. If she believed she still controlled the narrative, I needed her to keep believing that. Because now, I knew the game. I walked outside, holding only my phone and the drive in my jacket pocket. The sky had turned that soft, gold-tinged hue that only Texas knows how to make. I sat in my truck, engine off, just listening to the quiet. This wasn't about salvaging anything anymore. It was about surviving it. By the time the sun disappeared beneath the rooftops the night before, I had already made the decision. It wasn't rage that drove it, just clarity, a cold, undeniable understanding. The next move had to be mine, and it had to be silent. So the following morning, just after 8 hours, I got dressed like it was any other workday, but instead of heading toward the office, I drove into downtown Houston with a flash drive in my pocket and a quiet storm in my chest. At 9:10 on the dot, I pushed open the door to a modest office above a bakery, the kind of place you wouldn't look twice at. Discreet. No marble lobby, no receptionist in heels. Just a small brass plaque beside the door that read, C. Latham, Attorney at Law. She greeted me with a handshake, firm but not overbearing, mid-50s, gray at the temples, eyes that scanned me without apology. She'd seen men like me before, I could tell. I didn't waste time. I pulled out the drive, slid it across the desk. These are photos, I said, from my wife's private drawer. Financial records, messages. There's a notebook, a kind of plan. She nodded once, then opened her laptop and began scanning the files. I watched her expression, but it never changed. She scribbled a few notes, flipped through the screenshots like she was paging through a manual she'd read before. After 5 minutes, she set the pen down. This isn't speculation, she said. This is structured, methodical. Someone has followed a multi-phase asset protection and spousal benefit strategy. One designed to place you in a weak position by the time divorce proceedings begin. Her voice was even, professional, but every syllable landed like a hammer. I leaned forward, heart thudding. So I'm not overreacting. No, she said simply. You're catching on just in time. She explained how in Texas the 5-year mark matters, not just emotionally, but legally. Qualifies a spouse for long-term benefit calculations and more leverage in negotiations. The way Marissa had moved money into a secondary account, classic financial distancing. The tone of those emails from her mother, strategic manipulation, not just mean-spirited. She's laying the groundwork for 2 things, Latham said. To claim you're emotionally detached and possibly unstable, and to appear as the sole responsible partner in the marriage. I nodded, but my throat tightened. She said that before, I whispered. that I retreat emotionally, that I'm always quiet when things matter. I thought it was just how we argued. She's reframing that as neglect, Latham said, not unkindly. It's textbook, Mr. Morris. Don't beat yourself up for missing it. These setups are subtle until they're not. I sat back. My palms were damp. My fingers curled into fists without thinking. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was character assassination. Then she pulled another folder toward her. Manila. Thin. I checked filings this morning, she said. There's nothing in motion yet. No petition filed. But 2 weeks ago, she did a preliminary consultation with another attorney, filed under her maiden name. I felt my stomach drop. She claimed concern about your mental state, Latham continued. She said, quote, "My husband has unpredictable reactions. I fear he's becoming emotionally unstable. That's on record." I couldn't speak for a moment. So she'd already started the story. Long before the fake firing joke. Long before I asked about the bank transfers. She was 2 steps ahead before I even knew I was in a game. Outside, the city moved like it always did. Cars, horns, people rushing in and out of lunch spots. But when I stepped out of that building, it all felt distorted, too loud, too bright. I sat in my truck and stared at my hands on the wheel. I wasn't just up against Marissa anymore. I was up against an entire version of me that she had been building in secret. One that didn't exist. One that could ruin me if I didn't start documenting every truth I still had. Back home, the air in the house felt heavier. Same walls, same furniture, but everything was cast in a new light now. I didn't stop to reflect. I moved deliberately, drawer by drawer, cabinet by cabinet. I pulled tax returns, printed account statements, gathered screenshots from our shared calendar. Any indication of my role, my routines, my reliability, even the corny anniversary card she gave me with phrases like, "to my rock," and "you're the calm in my storm," I took those too. If she was going to claim I had failed her emotionally, then the evidence would say otherwise. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud account. Then I backed it up again. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. And as I double-checked folders, labeling them with dates, I realized something. The softness that used to guide my decisions, that part of me that said, "Be patient, give her space," was gone. It didn't vanish in anger. It just burned itself out. Now there was only resolve. Before leaving my office, I sat for a moment in the dark, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan barely audible. I wasn't mourning the marriage anymore. That ended the night I saw the word "execute" in her notebook. What I was protecting now wasn't love. It was the truth. And the truth needed to survive whatever she was building. That evening, as the house settled into its usual hush, I caught the first clear sign that she knew something had shifted in me. She was watching me, not in that casual, distracted way spouses sometimes do, but with sharp, careful observation. Her smile, when I walked into the kitchen, was too calculated, too stretched at the corners, like she was performing kindness for an audience that wasn't there. I moved with intention, keeping my gestures slow and neutral. I didn't let my eyes linger too long on anything. I didn't ask her how her day went, and most of all, I didn't offer up conversation to fill the silence. It wasn't anger, it was control. Silence had become my shield now. Dinner was tense. We sat across from each other, the clink of silverware on ceramic far louder than it had any right to be. She barely touched her food. My phone buzzed twice, both times from a colleague confirming tomorrow's early meeting, but each time I saw her glance at the screen like she expected it to betray me. She wasn't acting like a partner anymore. She was acting like someone running surveillance. The tension kept building in strange ways. Every word I didn't say became suspect. Every breath I drew too slowly seemed to make her eyes narrow. After dinner, I was drying a plate at the sink when she stepped in closer than usual lately. Her arms crossed, her voice light, but I could hear the rehearsed tone in it. "You've been acting off lately," she said. "Kind of jumpy, emotional. Should I be worried about you?" I set the plate down, slowly, didn't look at her. "No," I replied calmly. "No need to worry." The way her smile faltered told me that wasn't the response she wanted. She leaned in just a fraction more. "Because if you are unstable, I need to know, Durrell. I can't be in this house with someone unpredictable." And there it was, clear as glass. She wasn't checking on me. She was baiting me, trying to provoke an outburst, maybe even recording me. Her phone had been face down on the island earlier, but now I couldn't recall if the camera lens was pointed at me or not. The idea made my chest tighten, but I stayed still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sigh or shift or even blink too fast. I gave her nothing. The silence between us thickened. She waited another beat, then stepped back, annoyed. "Fine," she said with a dismissive shrug. "Pretend everything's okay. You're good at pretending." She turned on her heel and walked out of the kitchen too quickly, shoulders stiff like a board. Her steps hit the hardwood floor harder than they needed to. That was how I knew. She was feeling the pressure now. The clock she'd been watching was ticking faster than she expected. About 20 minutes later, I was in the living room pretending to scroll through emails when her tablet, left charging on the arm of the couch, buzzed. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. The screen lit up with a preview of a message. It was from her mother. "Move faster. If he's pulling away, you lose leverage. Push the instability angle. Don't wait." My spine went rigid. That single message said more than any confrontation ever could. They weren't just suspicious. They knew I was slipping out of their control. And now they were accelerating their timeline, trying to force a reaction, something they could twist, screenshot, submit, label. I sat there, pretending to still read, letting the words sink in. So they wanted me unstable? They wanted me cornered so I'd lash out and prove whatever narrative they were weaving behind my back. They weren't going to get it. Later, when I heard the shower running upstairs, I stepped out onto the back patio. The air was thick and warm, the way Houston nights get when the breeze forgets to move. I stood in the dark, looking at the dim outline of the fence, trying to remember the first year Marissa and I lived here. The weekends we stained that fence together. The times she laughed at the squirrels stealing birdseed. All of it seemed like a different lifetime now. Another version of us, another version of me, one who still believed in loyalty being enough. I thought about the words in that notebook. Year 1 to 2. Stabilize. Build trust. I'd lived those years fully, thinking we were building something together. She was building a case. I let that pain settle, not to wallow in it, but to absorb it. Because from this point on, everything I did would be rooted in truth and silence, not passivity, strategy. I walked back inside just as the water cut off. She was descending the stairs in her robe, towel around her neck. When our eyes met at the base of the steps, she paused, waiting, maybe expecting a question or an apology for being off, or even a flare of emotion. But I gave her a nod, not cold, not friendly, just still. And I kept walking, her brows pinched slightly, barely noticeable to anyone who hadn't lived with her as long as I had. But I caught it. That flicker of discomfort. She didn't know what I knew, or how much. She didn't know how calm I could stay when everything around me was coming apart. And that made her nervous. Good. By the time the sky began to shift from deep charcoal to a softer blue, I was already at the kitchen table with every document spread out in front of me. There was no trembling in my hands, no bitterness on my tongue. Just purpose, calm, precise, and final. They thought I wouldn't figure it out, that I'd keep playing the part they wrote for me, confused, slow, unaware, but they forgot something. I might not be loud, but I listen. I watch. And now I understood. I didn't need to scream to be heard. One by one, I slid each piece of evidence into a plain folder. Nothing fancy, no thick envelope, no binder, just a cheap manila folder from the bottom drawer. Let them mistake simplicity for weakness. Inside were color printouts of every transaction she tried to hide, screenshots of conversations, even my work evaluations, just in case she tried to argue about my mental instability. I added the HR notice I'd almost forgotten, confirmation of my steady performance, my absence of disciplinary issues. That one I knew would be hard to argue with. When I zipped it up inside my satchel, the finality of it landed. This wasn't just proof anymore. It was closure. At 8:57 a.m., I heard her upstairs. I waited. At 9:03, she came down in yoga pants and a zip-up, phone in hand, ready to head out like it was any other morning. She paused when she saw me, already dressed in slacks and a clean shirt. Her eyes flicked to my shoes. "You're going somewhere?" I nodded. "We are." She tilted her head, a rehearsed smile twitching at the corner of her lips. "Together?" "Yes. We're going to your parents' house." I called ahead. That smile? Gone. For a fraction of a second, the expression underneath broke through. Not anger, not confusion. Alarm. She covered it quickly. "Why would we do that?" "Because it's time." She didn't respond, just stared, calculating. But she didn't refuse. The drive was quiet. Not the kind of silence you settle into, but the kind you carry like a stone in your chest. She didn't touch the radio, didn't check her phone. I could feel her thoughts ticking like a metronome beside me. When we pulled into her parents' driveway, her posture changed, shoulders back, jaw set. I recognized that stance. Marissa always walked into rooms like she was 3 moves ahead, but not today. Her mother opened the door with a warm tone, but her eyes were sharp. Her father stayed just behind her, stiff smile in place, like a man trying to pretend he didn't know a storm was coming. We sat at the dining room table. Sunlight poured in through the big bay window behind me. I chose that seat on purpose. It made them squint when they looked my way. "Durrell," her father said, "we didn't expect you to bring, well, whatever this is, without calling first." "I called," I said simply. "You agreed to a conversation. That's all I'm here for." I placed the folder on the table. No ceremony. No build-up. Then I opened it. First, the notebook copy. I slid it forward. Marissa's mother reached for it. Her face didn't change, but her fingers hesitated over the cover before flipping through the pages. Next, the emails, printed and dated. I laid them one by one across the table. My hands were steady. I wasn't looking for reactions yet, just laying out the truth. Then came the transfer history. Every regular payment into the holding account, the second credit card in her name, the HR notice, the insurance update, and finally, the email from her mother. I placed that last. No one moved. Marissa spoke first, her voice forced calm. I don't know what he thinks he's found, but this is... I slid the paper with her mother's name across to her. She went quiet. Her father looked between the two women, unsure of who to challenge first. You told me this was just precaution, he said slowly to his wife, confusion cracking through his calm. Her mother snapped, I told you to stay quiet. Marissa turned to him, eyes sharp. He's twisting everything. This is exactly what I warned you about. He's unstable. This is proof. Look how obsessed he's gotten. Her phone buzzed on the table. We all looked down at the same time. She'd forgotten to turn off previews. A message flashed across the screen. Did you pressure him yet? Don't let him slip. 5 years is next month. Her mother lunged for the phone, but the words had already settled into the room like ash. Her father blinked. What did that say? Marissa stood up too fast. That's out of context. It's just a friend. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The room said it for me. Her father stood up slowly. You used us. You said this was just preparation. That nothing was actually going to happen. Her mother's voice was quieter now, shaky. You weren't supposed to be here for this. I looked at Marissa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. You weren't supposed to find out like this, she muttered. Those words, they weren't even defensive anymore, just defeated. I'm not here for revenge, I said, standing. I'm here because the truth deserves to be heard, even if it's spoken into silence. I left the folder in the middle of the table. You can keep it, I added. Give it to your lawyer. And then I walked out. I didn't slam the door, didn't look back. Just stepped out into the sharp mid-morning light, into the kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. When I got back to my truck, the weight on my chest was gone. But the stillness that followed wasn't relief. It was a quiet settling of what now had to be done. That evening, I didn't sit in the living room like usual. I didn't turn on the TV or check the mail. I walked straight through the house, each step echoing louder than the last. The silence wasn't heavy like before. It was honest. It didn't lie to me anymore. No pretense, no masks. I didn't hear from Marissa. Not a text. Not a missed call. Nothing. It was the loudest kind of quiet. A silence that comes after something breaks too clean to fix. The kind that doesn't offer regret, only distance. I grabbed a small duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Just a change of clothes, a phone charger, a worn copy of Baldwin I hadn't read in years. I didn't know where I was going to sleep, and honestly, it didn't matter. I just knew I couldn't stay here tonight. Before leaving, I sat down at the edge of the bed, not to rest, but to breathe. My fingers brushed the same comforter we'd shared for almost 8 years, and suddenly, it felt like sitting in someone else's life. At 9:42 p.m., I forwarded everything to Attorney Latham, every screenshot, every printed message, the new photos of the folder left on the table. Within minutes, her reply came in. This is decisive. You're in a far stronger position now. I recommend filing first. Her words weren't triumphant. They weren't meant to be. They were calm, firm, necessary. Like a surgeon letting you know the cancer can be cut out clean. I sat on the back porch with the last of the evening light resting on the fence. Houston never really gets cold in November, but the breeze had a little bite to it, as if reminding me winter was coming either way. And I let myself feel it all, not just the betrayal. That was too easy. I felt the things underneath it, years of being small so someone else could shine, of laughing at jokes that cut too close, of walking on eggshells without realizing I'd forgotten how to walk freely. I thought back to how many arguments I'd avoided just to keep the house quiet. How many times I swallowed doubt because I believed in the version of her I first fell in love with. But sitting there, under that soft sky, I realized something. I wasn't just leaving her. I was leaving behind a man I didn't recognize anymore. The man who believed peace required his silence. The man who kept shrinking so love would stay. Around 11, her father called. His name popped up on my phone like a flashback. I answered, quiet. "Durrell," he said, voice low. "We didn't know it would go this far." My response was steady. "You knew enough." He hesitated. "We won't contest anything. There won't be legal pushback." That pause afterward, hollow, reluctant, full of what-ifs, was the closest thing I'd ever get to an apology from a man like him. I didn't need more. After the call, I walked back inside to grab my keys. That's when I saw it, sitting on the kitchen table. Just a napkin, a white one with faint blue trim. Cheap. The same brand we'd used during our first anniversary dinner, back when we couldn't afford anything but takeout and laughter. It wasn't placed with intention. It wasn't folded neatly or left with a note. It was just there. But it stopped me cold. I stood there staring at it for longer than I care to admit, because for a moment, it pulled me back to the version of me that believed in forever. The me that had hope like a heartbeat, and pride in a life built together. And in that moment, I understood the ache wasn't for her. It was for the man I used to be. I took the napkin, not as a souvenir, but as a reminder of what not to return to. The road to Buffalo Bayou was quiet. I took the long way, windows cracked, letting the wind carry out what was left of the tension. That overlook had always been my thinking place, even before Marissa. I'd sit there as a kid after bad report cards, as a teen after heartbreaks. Tonight, it welcomed me like an old friend. I stood near the railing, watching the bayou move with slow certainty. The streetlights cast a soft shimmer on the water. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was sinking. I didn't come here for revenge. I didn't need to see them fall. I came to remind myself that I survived, that I still had my name, my truth, and the right to peace. Somewhere behind me, a car passed. Somewhere down the trail, a couple laughed. Life was moving forward, and so was I. I headed back to my truck, keys in hand, ready to drive toward a future that finally belonged to me.